You are listening to episode 27 of the Lewis and Kyle Show with Tomas Laurinavicius.
So I think in our world, we have this huge problem where, we're learning business from people who are teachers by default. They are teachers who teach business. And best business people, they don't teach because they're busy doing business. So you never understand why they're successful, how they're operating, and what's the deal with them. So there's huge opportunity for people as well, for us to, I'm a writer by default, but if I master another skill as design, I can write about design from designer's perspective.
Hello and welcome to the Lewis and Kyle Show, an interview podcast where Lewis and I document and share our journey to improve and learn more about entrepreneurship, investing, and health. By having deep conversations and interviews with incredible mentors, we want to share what we learn with you all. Lewis, who do we have on the show today?
Hey Kyle, in this interview, we talked to Tomas Laurinavicius, a Lithuanian lifestyle blogger and content marketer who's someone I've been a long-time reader of. I was extremely excited to have this opportunity to speak with him and pick his brain, as they say, about his thoughts on habits and routines, the books that he reads, the productivity software that he uses, his opinions on being very structured versus kind of being more free-flowing in life, as well as his lessons from being essentially a digital nomad for 5 years. It was an awesome conversation. He went way deep right off the bat, which was awesome, and kind of sent us for a wild ride, which ended up leading to a really thought-provoking and worthwhile conversation. I hope you all enjoy it as much as we did. And with that, we are going to cut to the interview. All right. Hey, Tomas, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I've been a reader of your work since the beginning of my freshman year in college 2 to 3 years ago. So this is really exciting for me. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Well, I appreciate it. And do you remember how did you find? Was Medium? Was it a newsletter? What was it?
Honestly, it might have been just on Google. It might be
Nice.
Based on searching for something specific, like either a book list or a summary of a book, or like a listicle about productivity tools, something like that. Believe it or not, That's probably how I first found you.
Lewis went through a life transformation his freshman year of college, and
I know about that.
He was doing a lot of search terms related around productivity, so I'm sure that it came somewhere around there.
Yeah. So from what I've read and seen from all your blogging and your newsletters, that you've had a pretty incredible journey over the past 3, 4, 5 years, over 50 countries in 5 years, if I have that right. So from the outside, it's kind of hard to explain what you've done for a career, for work. So I'm going to let you answer that question. When you meet a new person, how do you answer that question about what you do or what you've done?
I don't want to jump too deep into philosophizing about it, but I got really tired of traveling and hearing the same thing over and over again, because in the end I don't really care what people do or where they're from, because once you tell me oh, I'm from Alabama or I'm from Arizona or whatever, I instantly have some kind of preconceptions, some kind of a stereotypes about the person or the place, or just any kind of pre-made bias that's this person is this or that. So I usually try not to even introduce myself. Someone just asked me so what do you do? And I'm like, I like strawberries, and they're like, oh, this guy is a weirdo, so they just they walk away. But yeah, but generally, traveling, maybe we can talk more about the good and bad about travel. But up until recently, I was doing content marketing for the professional part, and to pay the bills and get capital for my own projects. And then until recently, I was doing it almost full time, and right now I'm doing half time is content marketing consulting and freelance writing. And other part is focusing on my own projects. So I still run my newsletter, which is monthly right now, Live Design. And then we just recently launched, I kind of built it myself, a job board for content writers. It's called Content Writing Jobs. And then I just realized, it's just going to take too much time just to run it myself. So I teamed up with my friend, and he's a co-founder right now. So my focus is split into 2 parts, and in between I constantly trying different things, and we're developing a couple of apps with my brother. He's an iOS developer here in Lithuania. So yeah, I would say like half of the time is professionally doing like content marketing, consulting, and then other parts are just really playing with different projects that most of the time really increase my value as a consultant.
Sure. Could you define content marketing for us? Because not everyone's familiar with what that is.
Right. I think everyone has like their own definition, and the one that I like is, like I like to compare it with blogging, where blogging is kind of like, like your journal, your kind of like a diary where you can just easily express yourself with no real end goal. Some people, like they're professional bloggers who do it for money, but there are people like I do sometimes I just want to express myself because I feel it's fulfilling, or I feel that I need to get out, like some ideas from my head, and sometimes these ideas help other people. So in blogging, there's no like clear goal, where in content marketing, I feel it has to have a specific endpoint. So you're not just doing it just to have it, a presence online. You're doing it to increase sales or increase traffic. But generally, you're doing it to get your target audience to go through the funnel. So funnel, a customer journey or customer experience, whatever you call it. So it's just about building an asset that works, like passively. It basically serves your business to make more sales or more traffic. And what I like about content marketing the most when you compare it to paid advertising is that it compounds. So you don't have to worry about doing it all over again and paying for it, because like once you stop paying for ads on Facebook or AdWords, your traffic stops and your sales drop. Where with content marketing, you can take advantage of organic search that increases all the time, and you don't have to do it all over again. So that's a very complex and long answer to that.
I think it's great. With content marketing, are you serving clients? Like, they give you an end goal and then you creatively find a path to that, or are you doing it for your own, something that you control, like thomaslau.com?
So I, like in the recent years, I was doing very, very different things, and content marketing is just like digital marketing is a huge topic, and content marketing is a small part of it. But I was doing a lot of outreach and link building, and I did some PR as well, and then email marketing, automation. And I had clients for different things, but I like the most something that I can control. So for example, link building or PR is very outside of my control zone. So I can, like spend 100 hours a month, but the outcome is not fixed or is not predictable, because, like one month you can land 5 interviews or 5 placements, where other month you may land 20. If you focus on content production, that's what I do mostly, or strategy and production. So most of the time I would offer a strategy. So for example, you come to me and you say, look, we have a drop shipping site, and we're selling organic bamboo bags in the United States, for example. So we get bags from Costa Rica and Mexico, and we sell to the United States. So I would say, okay, the strategy, we need to figure out what is your customer. So we would do, like a short kind of a brainstorm and workshop to figure out what's the target audience, then figure out what are the pain points, what are the expectations, and try to understand the customer journey or the sales funnel. And then for every phase of that sales funnel, we would create different pieces of content. So the easiest, like very simplified funnel that I like to use is information, education, and then solution. So information would be, like just someone is not even aware of these bamboo bags. So you would just say, like these are top 10 companies in the world that millennials are going crazy, and these are actually helping, like to build a sustainable future or whatever. So very, very kind of newsy BuzzFeed type of article that's, like easily shareable and people are just curious, or some kind of a listicle or whatever. And then in the middle would be education, like would be something more about talking about like, okay, plastic is actually killing not just our, like environment, but your lungs, or I don't know, something, your food. And then you would educate more. And in that education phase, you would make them more aware of the problem and actual solution. But you are not really pushing that much. So at this point, it's all of these like how-to type of articles. So how to, like to make your own bag from stuff that you have at home or whatever, or how to reduce plastic consumption this year. So something along those lines. And then inside the education phase, you make the solution more present. And then the bottom of the funnel is really talking about the benefits of your product and, like where you can get it and pushing a bit more to the sale. So that would be, like the whole process for strategy. And for these different topics, like right now we're just like theoretically talking about it, but I would look at actual data and actual keywords, what people are searching for. And sometimes you're surprised what people are searching for, because as a marketer, I had, like this understanding, oh, they're going to be just looking for this and this and that. But most of the time, like the language or the angle is completely different. And just by looking at what people are searching for, it's not really about like getting, like the biggest or like the most popular keywords, because it's hard to dominate these keywords, but it's about like finding what specific questions are people asking and trying to find if there are any existing good answers to these questions. So most of the time, if the question is very specific, the results are going to be from like social media sites like Reddit or LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a huge opportunity, because you can see that there's not a single, dedicated blog post or an article or a landing page dedicated to answer specifically that question. So one part of the strategy would be, like just going with the client and through customer journey and looking at the data, and then after that, putting that data into strategy and saying, like, okay, we're going to write 5 articles a month or 5 a week, targeting this part of the funnel, this part of the funnel, and this part. And this is something that I can control. So I can focus and I can provide a strategy. And then at the same time, I can focus on writing or, like finding expert writers in bamboo, in this case, bags or whatever, or sustainable fashion. And these writers can, like charge per word, and I can charge per article or per word or per hour for my clients. And that's something more predictable. So that's how my searches would look up until like recently, because before that, it would be very scattered. They would say, oh, we want some, like links or, like some guest posting or whatever. So I would just jump on whatever they're asking. And this is really killing productivity, especially if you're a solo founder or a freelancer. It's a huge time waster, because every time you're doing custom work, you can already use the templates, the processes, and the workflows that you have built. And, like every time if you need to find new contractors, subcontractors, it's taking a lot of time.
Well, that's a pretty good crash course in being a content marketing consultant and all that's involved in the funnel building process and the writing process and the constructing it as a repeatable business. And we've gotten a little ahead of ourselves in what we kind of intended. And that's kind of my fault for asking those more detailed questions. But we're still interested in kind of starting more towards the beginning of, when you first got exposed to the idea of lifestyle design, because we kind of jumped right into the niche you found as a successful business to run remotely. But if we can kind of scale back to the beginning and talk about your first time you were exposed to the concept of lifestyle design and start there.
Okay. I'm not really sure when, like when it clicked, but I think it was really powerful to see an old interview with Steve Jobs, where he's talking about, like the moment you realize that you can influence the world, you can, like make changes to it. I don't remember exactly, the video, but
it's like you touch the world and something comes out.
Yeah, like
Yeah, it's dynamic. Yeah.
Right. So I think that video was for me like, and I watched it like when I discovered it. I think it's from like 80s, 90s, something. It's very old,
Mm-hmm.
but I watched it like 10, 15 times. I think the first time, because I think the first time I saw it, I felt like, wow, there's something, but I still cannot grasp what he's saying. And then I kept watching and watching and watching and watching. And then I felt, yeah, it's easy for you to say you're Steve Jobs. Like, you built this multi-billion-dollar empire and, like you basically changed the world. And I think that moment when I discovered that video, I felt there is something I still don't understand, but I want to figure out, because what I feel or think he's saying, it's probably, like it's not the answer to life, but it's basically something very, very powerful that I want to figure out and use to my advantage. So I think lifestyle design is very it can be very selfish as well. I think, yeah, most of the people are quite selfish because they're interested in, like designing the best life for themselves, but that's just human nature. And I don't think, like you only succeed by succeeding yourself. I think if you help other people to succeed, you build a better society for yourself, and like just the compound effects happens, and then it benefits everyone. But yeah, I think that was the beginning of lifestyle design for myself. Just kind of like this, like mindset shift that life might not be what I think it is, and there are probably many things that I can change. And I think I'm not sure if it was the same video when he said, like everything you see around was built by people
Oh my, I was
no smarter by you. So
that was what I was about to
so
say, is that
right,
sentence itself like changed my mindset and
right.
put me on a path that I wasn't on before. It's just like everything around you, it was a choice by someone before you that was not any smarter than you are. It makes you look at everything different. One thing that you said earlier, though, that I just wanted to touch on, come back to, a lot of what you're talking about really flies in the face of, the average 9 to 5 rat race mentality. And one of the things that really flies in the face is, you said that when people ask you what you do, you like to say, I like strawberries, but when you're talking to somebody that's in that mentality, they'll be like, oh, well, I'm the vice president of First American Bank, and like talk about it like that. And
Right.
it's just funny how directly opposite your answer to it is.
So for me, I think it's also part of lifestyle design is increasing your self-awareness and really knowing your own like strengths and your own worth. Again, like I don't want to touch too many topics because it might get confusing, but I think meditation was the main thing that really allowed me to understand, like the broader term of lifestyle design for myself. Like everyone has their own definition. For some people, it's private jets, it's living on Bali or California, or doing, concert and huge gigs, becoming famous, whatever. And without meditation, I would be still chasing all of these goals. And most of these goals are very unachievable for, like most people. And I was just listening to Eric Barker's book. It's called Barking Up the Wrong Tree, Eric Barker. So he's saying that, like we're sold on this idea that you can become anyone, an astronaut, a rock star, a superstar, doctor, surgeon, whatever. But in reality, like you're not destined for that. Like the odds are against you, and it's, like 1 in 100 million maybe. So your chances are very slim. And the earlier you understand that your chances at this thing are very slim, you can look at, like very realistic options that you have. So being very, like optimistic and saying like, I'm going to do my best. I'm going to build a business to sustain myself, my family, and, like help communities and causes that I care about. This is pretty realistic and optimistic, and you have pretty huge odds. But if you are, like 5'5" or whatever, you cannot, like just expect like, oh, I'm gonna be on NBA All-Star. Like it's probably not gonna happen. Like your chances are extremely low. So in this case, you are optimistic but very unrealistic. Or if you have, like if you are born with some bad health and you say like, oh, I'm gonna go to Mars or whatever, it's very unlikely that this is gonna happen. But if people are, like around you, they're saying, yeah, you can do it, just keep believing, keep, like doing whatever you do to achieve it, and you're also pushing yourself to actually achieve it, at some point you're gonna realize that, like this is completely impossible. But at that point you may have wasted like 15-20 years going towards that goal. So I think it's very important to understand that in life you don't need much. And right now, like when we're going through this pandemic, you understand like, yeah, I actually don't need much. I would just love to, like take a walk without a mask with my friends. That's it. That would make me happy. So this global pandemic, I think it brought us a lot of forced mindfulness or time to think about what is important and what makes us really happy. And I think it's really important in everyone's journey to, like design their own lifestyle. So I think I went off completely the question that you asked, but awareness is probably the key. Understanding what are you trying to achieve with the, like designing your lifestyle. And there are many moving parts, and I think it's also important to understand that things change all the time, you change all the time, and it's all right to go off the track and start over.
I agree with you that if you choose something that probabilistically is just a poor choice in terms of banking on that to be your strategy to be successful or happy, such as trying to make it into the NBA or make it into a space program where literally only, like if you look at the SpaceX launch like 2 days ago, only 2 astronauts go up. You know what I mean? It's just millions of people want to do it. And no matter how good you are, they're only going to pick 2. Whereas if you choose something with everyone can start, like there's no restriction that only 10,000 people in society get to own their own business, or only 10,000 people get to start websites, or only 10,000 people get to start blogs. So when you choose something that has a better probability or just no barriers to entry in terms of like a fixed cap, you have a better chance. So I'm curious to hear how you got started. So this is kind of going back to the previous question a little bit, when you've kind of reached that awareness and that like fully integrated that idea of I can manipulate the world, I can choose my own path and start building a life around my strengths and around what I want to do. What did you initially set out to do? Did you set out to write right away? Did you set out to start a business? Did you set out to travel and figure it out later? I know at one point you launched a magazine. How did that all kind of come into play, the beginning of your lifestyle design journey, and ultimately where that led to being able to support the journey that you went on?
Okay, I need to try not to go off topic too much, but highly recommend a book, The Defining Decade. Basically a book for 20-somethings about how, like your 20s are more important than you think. And the way she explains, one of her actual patients explain, like when you're in your 20s, it's really overwhelming, especially right now, having so many choices, because you start feeling paralyzed, because you can do whatever you want, and everyone says like you can do whatever you want, and you can become whatever you want, but you don't know where to start. So the kind of analogy that like the patient gives is, you're in the middle of the ocean and you can swim any direction you want, but you don't know which way to go. So you're just like just floating there, and the best thing you can do is just to really try, just pick some random direction and just try like going towards it. So I think many people in their 20s, and I felt the same way, where I felt like, yeah, I got access to internet. I have so many, like directions I can go to, like, what do I do? And, like, what's the best way to do it? And I want to maximize, like benefit. I don't want to waste my time. I want to use my time wisely.
Those are the questions that Kyle and I are really asking ourselves right now in our early 20s, recognizing that same opportunity, the internet. We could do graphic design or programming or blogging or marketing consulting or any of those things. So
what do you use? What do you use right now? Like, what's your thinking process?
So we're both finishing up college in the next year or two. So that's kind of a somewhat full-time endeavor, while the internet, figuring out how to make the online entrepreneurial income kind of is not the secondary question, but we finishing school first of all, and I'm studying computer science. But I'm thinking more, I really enjoy writing and want to ask you some questions about your writing process and the strategies you took in that domain. But I like writing and, writing on Medium, writing on my own blog, potentially freelancing and writing for other people. I mean, I subscribe to the content writing newsletter from your job post website that you've just created. So I read those emails and I've considered some of those opportunities. Then also very much the consulting route where, funnel building and web design, kind of like taking a team through that strategy and then doing the full stack of that process, building their website and writing their sales copy and putting together that email marketing backend. But that's a lot of pieces to learn at once. And that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Lewis is a very skilled writer. He's really, really good. For me, I'm very passionate about real estate, and that's what I want to do long-term is allocate capital into good real estate deals. So right now I'm working a property management internship where I am getting a small piece each week of everything that it takes to run these apartment complexes, so that in the future I can make really good operationally efficient decisions when it comes to running the properties. Lewis and I love to talk to people, and this is a reason to reach out to people. Our long-term goal, it's just to have individual conversations with people that we wouldn't normally have access to.
That's brilliant. I would do the same. And I did some podcasts in the past for, like multiple reasons. And some of them are the ones that you're saying. I think use the podcast and questions as well to be very, very specific, because I went to, I think, WordCamp in Sofia, Bulgaria, and I got a chat with the WordPress founder, Matt Mohammed, and I had probably 5 to 10 minutes, like to ask a question. I'm like, what do I do? Like, like it's Matt, like, what do I ask? And then I just asked some random, like general bullshit question that you can just Google. And so at that time I was running that design magazine, Entrepreneur, and I asked so like how do you like deal with hiring talent and like scaling your operations, because like managing more than 3 people for me is getting hectic and very stressful. And that's that's very, very vague question, because for him and for any kind of person to answer that question, you need to provide probably 50 or 100 different data points for them to give more context to better understand you. Because like if your like context is like, oh, I want to like build a $1 billion unicorn and want to exit, different context could be, I just want to build a lifestyle business and never work in my life, which is very different from like the first context. So just by providing that single data point, it would change the answer. So my point here is, you're already connecting with people. Just try to ask very, very specific questions. Try to ask something quite uncomfortable, because like, hey, can you, Kyle or Luis, can you send me your exact pitch email to me that you sent, to Joe Rogan or whatever. So that's something uncomfortable for you, but most of the time people are going to be like, yeah, sure. Like I'm just going to send it your way. So from like getting these very, very specifics, you get to see how actual things work. Because right now, like if we're doing this same podcast in a month or two and you ask the same questions, I'm probably just going to say different things, just theorizing and trying to rationalize my own choices in the past, or, like my current choices. Because in the end, we're just really telling ourselves a story. And what I liked, I think yesterday I listened to this audiobook by Robert Kiyosaki, the new one. It's called Fake. And he says history is basically made up of 2 words, his story. Because you cannot just encapsulate history in like written or recorded word or whatever, because the world is so huge. And there's just one, like this one person just describing what's around him or around her. So it's pretty much impossible to encapsulate the reality. And history is basically his story. So for me, it was just mind blowing. At this very early age, I think it's very important to just get really obsessed with details and try and understand. So like, why do you do it? And like, how exactly do you do it? And could you share your template? Getting this inside peek into their infrastructure or publishing process or sales process, it's going to open a lot of doors for yourself and gonna fill a lot of gaps for yourself. Getting back to your question about like how to like start, I think to try many different things and then see what fits you naturally. So for me, it took like 10 years to understand like, yeah, I actually enjoy writing process, not the actual publishing. Publishing is also good. It feels good when you publish something, and even if you get something and some attention, some feedback from it, it just feels even better. But I realized like, wow, I actually do it because I like writing. It's not something that I'm chasing. So I think doing different things, you start to realize that some things come naturally to you. And like for me, being from very, very rural place here in Lithuania, I felt, yeah, like web design and blogging, it sounds interesting, but I just have no idea how to capitalize on that and how to make a career. So I always kind of felt scared that I felt, oh, I need to chase, like a typical economy degree or like just get a degree and go get a normal job. You have to get your hands dirty for probably 2-3 years to understand what you're good at, like naturally. It doesn't have to be, like outcomes really good, but you just have to be naturally curious about the process. So for example, like real estate, just very recently, I started like reading more about it, like, like as a possible investment option and so on. And, like there are many many things that are just boring for me. And for you, it probably just comes naturally, like, oh, it's interesting. I'm curious about this and about that. And I want to talk, like with your real estate circle, you want to talk about these things naturally. So you already have advantage that you're naturally gifted and curious about that topic and about that direction. And then if you can combine that thing with online marketing or just paid ads, you can just go as specific as Reddit ads. Reddit ads and real estate, you already have a huge chance to succeed because there are not many people are doing it. And then if you add the third ingredient, like if you master copywriting, for example, like cold email outreach or something, then you are just unstoppable. Like no one is going to stop you because you have these three strengths. And if you can combine all of these, you have a huge advantage. Think about the tool or the company or the service that you use obsessively. That's, like, I don't care if Microsoft releases new update for their software. I'm not a Microsoft or Windows user. But if Apple releases a new native app or whatever that helps my personal workflow, I'm actually excited. Like, I want to read the news. So let's say you're obsessed with Airtable or Notion or one of these, like productivity tools, things or whatever.
Sure.
And there's a big chance that there are people who are using it. So there are two things. One thing, like if you become Airbnb consultant, the more Airbnb gets funding or the more popular they become, the bigger your client pool, because the more people are going to use Airbnb, the more people are going to have problems with Airbnb. Here, you can just pick one tool or one service and become master of it. And master meaning, like if you use it daily, you probably know already 90% more than just general user who starts using the service. So I think at the very beginning, you can just focus on that one thing and say, okay, I'm going to become a Google Drive expert. And expert being, like I'm going to know more than 90% of the beginners. My target audience is beginners. And you're going to be surprised, like how many people Google every month, like how to log into Google Drive, like, like problems like this, or like how to reset your password, or like how to create a new document. So obviously these people are probably not going to pay you, like good money, but try to combine all of these curiosities and like skills that come naturally to you with a specific tool or a couple of tools, and then go to business context. At the beginning, just go B2B, combine your skill set and ride the wave of super popular software products. That would be probably the best way right now.
I'm really, really inspired by what you're calling theorization and how you are thinking about all these things all the way through and articulating it all the way to the last sentence. I just wanted to compliment you there. And then touch on one thing that you were talking about, and that is the quality of the questions that you ask. I'm a big believer in the fact that the quality of the questions that you ask are what determines the quality of your life. And how specific and how direct you are with the questions that you ask, the better results you're going to get.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And it's really scary, like, I don't know about you guys in school, but in my school, it was already, like independent Lithuanian kind of education system. It's still like the educational and school system still had this kind of like Soviet feeling where you cannot question the teacher's authority. And, like when you're taught that the world works this way, like authority knows everything from very early age, I feel I had to really unlearn most of the stuff that I learned in school, because you cannot just ask like, why is that? They would just shut you and say like, this is incorrect. I know the answer. Stop asking stupid questions or whatever. So I think asking questions, it's probably a skill as well.
We do actually have a few specific questions for you relating to, like we've kind of already established some of the things that you do professionally that we are interested in along the lines of writing, along the lines of marketing. So I think now would be a good time to turn the table and give you some of those specific questions. First one's about your work habits in general. So a lot of this work in consulting and writing you did in hostels while traveling, and not just, sitting in your same home office. So can you tell us about your work habits and how you were able to work consistently and produce consistently on quote unquote like an endless vacation?
When I started, like this whole like lifestyle design journey, trying to figure out how to build a better lifestyle for myself. And I was just following a lot of people, like, as you mentioned, Tim Ferriss, and then, like watching a lot of Steve Jobs videos and Tony Robbins. And most of the stuff is very general because they're targeting really just, like general public. And most of that content is top of the funnel. So that top of the funnel is just informational content. The other day I had this chat with Wi-Fi Tribe group as well, like video chat, where we spoke about lifelong learning and, like about habits and stuff. And someone just asked, like the classic question. So how long does it take to form a habit? There's research to support whatever angle or belief you have. So like if it doesn't take any time to form a habit, you're going to find proof or research, to support that. If it takes 16 days or 9 days or 264, you're going to find something. So for me, I think it was very important to kind of mimic other people, what they're doing, because I wanted to do what they're doing. And most of them, they're talking about, like habits, consistency, waking up and making up your bed, and like meditating, doing exercise, journaling, and so on and so on. And I was doing it like religiously for probably 4 or 5 years. So for me, it was just kind of like chasing these habits. And at the same time, I feel that habits might not be the most important thing. I think the general direction and behavior, like tendencies, are more important than just some random habits. So at the beginning for me, and still kind of is when I want to reset. So yeah, at the beginning it was when you go to a new country, especially if it's like a different time zone, you need some kind of reset button. And it's very hard to tell yourself, like, I'm just going to sit and work right now. Like, it just doesn't work like that. So for me, like, very good grounding experience was to have my morning routine. And that was highly inspired by Miracle Morning. This book for me was very inspiring because I was kind of like doing my own kind of version of it. But then I read the book and then I felt like, yeah, it makes perfect sense what he's saying. I need to improve it. So for me, it really worked very well. Like when I would go to a new place, I would just have my routine and it would be the same, like waking up early, meditating, journaling, reading, stretching, going to gym, and then getting back to work. So when you travel, you need to have some kind of grounding experience, or like this reset button, as I say. And that for me was very, very important because, like when you're traveling every couple of weeks or every couple of months, like your mind just becomes a huge chaos, huge mess. And I think that was very important for me. Yeah. Recently, I started to kind of slow down and slowly settle down in one place. With my wife, we spent like 5 months in Spain. And right now here in Lithuania, we're planning to be for at least a year. So right now, I don't think my habits are that important because my environment is kind of predictable. And then, like when I put these headphones on, it's kind of like mind conditioning saying like, it's time to work. Sure. I'm in my chair, I'm in my room here, and it's time to work. So I wouldn't say like habits are that important once you establish your routines in a way. So in a way, like these habits are internalized already. But yeah, like at the beginning, it's very important to get into that routine kind of like testing zone and see what sticks, what doesn't. So for a long time, I tried to do, like journaling and affirmations. It just doesn't stick with me. And I'm not going to keep doing it just because, like 5 New York Times bestsellers are saying it. It might be working for them or their audiences, but for me, it doesn't work. So again, like you need to be very comfortable with accepting that things are not going to work for you. And, like you cannot just beat yourself up and say like, why am I so stupid? Like why programming doesn't work for me? Like people are making so much money. I can build the next Facebook or WhatsApp or Instagram, but if it naturally doesn't come to you, you cannot just keep beating yourself up. So with habits acquisition, it's more about really your environment design rather than trying to form your habits, because if there's any friction, you're just going to drop it at some point. Right now, I'm spending more time giving myself just, like space to experiment and think. Like sometimes I would just say like, yeah, I'm just going to start a new project. I didn't look at the sales. I don't know how I'm going to make money, but I feel that there is opportunity in this, and I don't know where I feel it or how I feel it, but I feel a lot more confident because I spent, like last decade building products, doing content marketing, talking with customers. And I think all of these dots, they just connect in the background. And when they connect, they just give you this confidence where you feel like, yeah, it might just work. So I don't want to waste time on, like writing everything down, planning. I just want to use that energy. I'll sprint as far as I can and then see if it works. And if it works or it doesn't, then I can reevaluate. Then I can look at the customer acquisition. I can look at the data and so on.
Well, I like that answer to that question a lot. We covered a lot there. I mean, I think during, the earlier years where you're traveling and you don't have a stable environment, having that stable routine as a substitute for the environment so that no matter where you are, you're doing the same thing. And that's kind of necessary to build up that skill set and learn and be disciplined for that period of time. And now you're kind of at a different point where you're in one place and you aren't hustling necessarily as hard, in the sense of hustling where you have to go out and do all these other things and it has to work. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to continue what you're doing. And you can fall back on that decade of experience, basically doing the same kind of thing. Another kind of quick question we have for you is before you embark on that lifestyle and during that traveling phase, a lot of people are interested in doing that, but financially, that's a big concern, how to make that feasible. What's a good target monthly income to be able to live that lifestyle comfortably?
Yeah, I think it comes back again to your personal risk tolerance. Like different people have different risk tolerance. And when I started out, I felt comfortable with the idea that I can make this work with $1,000. So that was 5-6 years ago, I think. And I was comfortable with the idea because I felt like I don't mind, like sleeping in a hostel because my desire to travel and learn new things and just see new things and like this idea of novelty was stronger than my fear of I might not be able to find a cheap hotel or hostel. I was very comfortable with uncomfortability because before that we did a Euro trip with my friend where we basically like hitchhiking from Lithuania, and we went to Spain, then we went to Italy, France, and all these like countries. So in like 30 days I think we went to 11 or 13 countries in Europe, and pretty much every single day we would go to a new city, and we would use hitchhiking or like local buses, trains, and we didn't have that much of money, so we were using couch surfing and like just trying to use our network to connect with people, to connect with their connections, to crash their couches. So I think that's like exposing ourselves to that uncomfortability with my friend gave us more confidence that we can actually make it work with like a lot less money than we thought. So you would need to evaluate your risk tolerance. It's crazy how we humans think like, why it's so hard to like start writing, because you're already thinking about like, oh, I'm gonna like publish the New York Times bestseller. Like, no, just accept like your first piece is going to suck, but for you it's gonna be a benchmark to compare yourself to. So you just need to like loudly say like, I'm a piece of shit writer. Like I'm gonna write the worst piece in the world right now, and no one is gonna win like this worst written piece award because I'm gonna win it. So you're just right with that expectation. This is gonna be the worst thing that people like ever written in the history, and you write it. There you go. It's the worst thing. You already acknowledge that you're a sucker at this thing. And from there, it's only way up. So the problem with, like the whole lifestyle design, the whole like digital nomad movement, or going even on your own, like you don't need to become, like full-time freelancer from day one. You can just say like, I want to see if I can make $1 online. Like, I just want to see if I can publish something on LinkedIn. Like I have my LinkedIn profile for 5 years. I never published anything. I just want to, share some things with people and see how it goes. And the whole like traveling lifestyle, you don't need to start going to 15 countries from day one. You can just say like, what if I just move to, like other city for the weekend and see if I can work from there? Or what if I can ask my boss if I can work, like 2 days out of coffee shop? Or what if I just move to another state or move to another country for a month and just see how, like just see what happens. You're going to learn a lot of things, and you're going to become more aware of what you're not aware of. So you're going to be thinking like, oh, I know all of these things, but you don't know what you don't know. So I think you're going to just have more information about the way you operate, and that's going to give you more answers to, like which way to go. So for the very beginning, I would say I would be pretty comfortable going on, like traveling kind of like tour if I have 6 months of savings. So if I already have some sort of income source, I would be like, okay, I have 6 months, like to fuck up. And then after these 6 months, and I'm just going to go home. Because if you already have the income, you're already covering, like the next month. So you're extending your 6 month period. So that would be comfortable. I was not as patient. So I left with like 3 months of savings. So I had like nothing, like what, like 3K, 4K. I had an income of probably $1,500, $2,000, which was very variable because I was doing freelance work. So, like 1 month would be 3K, other months you would get a couple of $100s. So I felt, okay, with 3 months of savings, I'm still going to have some stress because, like there's this uncertainty, but I'm having my kind of like monthly income, and I'm pretty confident I can keep it or even increase it in the next, like 3 months.
Yeah.
So I left with like 3 months of savings, but I think for like general people, 6 months would be pretty comfortable. So first of all, try to, like lower your costs. Buy some beans, buy some frozen fish, try to eat for, like $15 a week. Well, maybe more. For me, $1,000 in Lithuania is actually a lot of money. Like in capital, obviously it's not a lot of money because the rent is almost $1,000. But I'm from a countryside, so like our family was living for less than that. Like 5 people and some animals were living for less than that. So I was kind of like coming from the background of like really being frugal. So for me it was like, yeah, I lived for like less than $1,000 before. Like this is nothing new for me. So I think if you're living in one of these expensive places, try to lower your costs and see how that goes for you.
I think that's a really good mindset to approach that situation, because a lot of people probably think, I need to be ready for they read 4-Hour Work Week or something. They hear about how Tim Ferriss did like a 14-month trip right off the bat. And it's like, I don't have 14 months worth of money. I don't already have a supplements company. I don't know 20 countries. I don't know how to do this. But I mean, it's not so difficult to, if you're not tied to a specific job, to just say, okay, well, I'm in, let's say me right now, I'm in Arizona. Maybe I'll just go to Mexico City for 2 weeks. One more question we had for you, and this isn't a super specific question, but it's definitely something we wanted to ask you because it's something you've done that's kind of similar to what we've done. So you had on your blog the Habits and Routine series, where you kind of did something similar to what we're doing now, where you brought in a bunch of very successful people that were interesting to you, and asked them habits, routines, why you're successful, just the standard battery of questions you'd like to ask a successful professional. But what's a dominant pattern that emerged from interviewing all those people? On what is something you chose to adopt from your own life as a result of that project?
I didn't really have any kind of like agenda. And right now, when I'm looking back at these questions that I asked, like I would make them completely different right now. And I'm going to tell you in a minute why and how. So habits and routines, they're not that important. What you want to understand, like the way their mind works and the way they connect things and the way they rationalize their choices and the stories that they tell themselves. And you try to kind of understand the patterns, as you mentioned, like what are the patterns between, like all these successful people. So I think I got a lot of confidence and a lot of like confirmation that I'm on the right track because I'm reaching out to these people. I have very similar beliefs and biases towards action and learning and entrepreneurship and starting things and connecting with people. When I interview these people, I just feel like, oh, they speak my language. They're interested in the same thing that I am. Most of these people, they're not saying something I don't already know. They're just repeating these things or reminding me these things. So that would give me as well, like you would start just questioning like, so what's the secret? And then probably there's no secret. There's just, like picking a direction and being obsessed about it. And that's about it. So for me, it was just getting that confirmation. Again, I was getting a lot more credibility because, you know, like once you interview one or the other person, you can kind of use their name to pitch the other person. So just building on top of what you build already. So that would be very powerful for me. And right now, when I'm looking back at it, I'm gonna probably drop the series, and I'm gonna tell you why. So with, you know, like this podcasting and interview process, you need to think about every single piece as a part of the bigger picture. So for example, we want to target these like best people in different categories, and we want to ask a set of questions that every single question is a small piece of a bigger picture. So for example, you don't just ask like, so what do you do? Because it's not a building block of a bigger blog post, for example. So instead of that, I'm going to ask like, so what are top 3 books that influenced your writing? So when 15 people answer to this question, you already have, if they are not repeated, you have 45 books that influence their writing. So that's automatically a new blog post that I don't need to produce. It was already produced because I interviewed these 15 people. So you go through another thing where you say like, so what do you do when you hit the writer's block? And there are already 15 different answers that you can just, you know, like create an article of itself and just quote these people. And then all of these questions are actually targeting search terms that have a huge amount of search volume. And you get, you know, like traffic, and then you also can diversify your revenue channels with affiliate marketing, with ads and so on, because you're getting this traffic. And people who you interview are generating all of this content for you for free, and then at the same time borrowing their influence or their name. So with interviews as well, what you can do, you can repackage all of the questions. And, you know, like if you're looking at real estate, for example, how do you write a proposal? Like, can you, you know, like walk me through the bullet points of your introduction page or whatever? You know, like something very specific that doesn't have that much of value, you know, like when you look at a small piece. But when you actually compile it with 10 or 100 people, you can draw different conclusions. And mymorningroutine.com, they actually have a book as well. I think it's called My Morning Routine. They interviewed me as well, which is very similar to what I do with habits and routines. They're just focusing on their morning, on the morning, questions about morning. But every single question is a data point, and they have different, you know, like pages for statistics. And these statistic pages are very nicely designed. So what time do you wake up? And they have like 300 people interviewed, and they can put, you know, like different times that people waking up on the graph. And then you can draw very nice graphics that are very attractive to press, to other bloggers. And it kind of gives you, you know, a chance to attract all of this traffic and attention. So I think like the strategy for production and for getting, you know, like influencers and experts to kind of like co-create the product for you, I think this is brilliant, because you can kind of extract the knowledge from people who are not experts at extracting their own thoughts from their heads. Where you read one piece that's written by a designer who knows how to write, and read a piece by a writer who just heard about design. So I think there's a huge value for trying to get these experts and creating a system to extract all that information, because that's going to be completely different, completely raw information that actually works for them, for these people. And it's not going to be some, you know, like recycled stuff that you can find online. But at the same time, you need to focus on selling it to people who actually spend money already. Just look at recent acquisitions, look at what businesses are spending money on, and you can always switch to consumers once you have enough capital. Our generation, we're obsessed about changing the world, doing good, but you cannot do that until you have the capital to do it. So the biggest philanthropists in the world, they're not philanthropists by default. All of these people, they did something before to build capital, and only then switched to, you know, like consumer B2C approach for their businesses. Because yeah, Tim Ferriss and many big podcasters, they're doing their podcasts because they're having fun. They're chatting with people, drinking, smoking, and just making jokes and whatever, just having good time. And people are paying attention to them because they already did, you know, like their homework. They made a lot of money through comedy, through business ventures and whatever. And it's very important to look at what people already pay money for, and then package this knowledge to people that are going to benefit from this the most. So while it's not sexy and not attractive to solve and target businesses, this is where most of the money is, and this is where you get the most traction. And I'm a huge believer in making businesses work from day one. I'm not a big fan of venture capital where you, like Uber or Slack, you're burning, like billions of dollars every year for a decade with hopes that it's going to work sometime. I like to look at what you can solve right now and charge from day one. And this is really hard to do, but if you're willing to bet on the strategy, you can just expand, and at some point you can just pivot to B2C or do another project that is closer to your personal beliefs or your personal cause that you believe in. There was another point about this. It's crazy how much you can achieve about playing in the gray area. So I would play in the gray area a lot, which is between. So for example, when I have an opening or I just have more time or I'm actually short on clients, I would go to my cold email list, and you can just go, startups that raised at least $5 million in the last year that are in e-commerce and SaaS space, and that would be my target audience. And then I would just go and extract all the emails, put it in the spreadsheet, and then in the CRM automate the emails. And my pitch would be kind of playing in that gray area, not saying that I'm if I'm pitching Apple, I'm not saying that I'm working with Microsoft, but I'm just telling them, look, I have a free spot for content writing, and I would love to work with you, but I'm considering Microsoft, but I just wanted to check in with you before, I reach out to them and offer you, my content writing services. This is what I can do for you. Do you want to chat more or whatever? So again, I don't even need to be thinking about Microsoft or emailing Microsoft or pitching Microsoft, but just saying to them that, look, if you don't hire me, all of this skill set that I have with all of these work examples and all of these strengths that I can offer to you are going to your competition. So in most cases, it's just playing with the angle. In this case, it makes them, feel like, oh, we're actually missing out. If we don't hire this guy, he's going to work with our competition and he might cause us trouble because he's going to outrank us for whatever. So what I'm trying to say here, always try to pre-sell stuff. Always try to just send an email with what you're thinking to do, but act as if it's already done. So for this, I would go, in Google, site, semicolon, linkedin.com/in/. So that means that you are only searching for this specific website, which is LinkedIn. Yeah. And then /in means that most of the profiles are at, LinkedIn/in, and then in my case, Tomas Lau, I think. And then you say to Google, only search this website and this subdomain. And then in between the quote marks, what's it called? Quote marks. Yeah,
that's fine.
I think so. Yeah, quote marks. You say real estate. So that means that it must include real estate in the page. And then you add another space and then quote marks. You add gmail.com. So that means that real estate is a must and gmail.com is a must on the page. So the Google is going to filter out, it's going to show a lot of pages that have real estate and gmail.com on the page, meaning that these people have their gmail.com email publicly available in their description probably or whatever, because usually, it's pretty hard to find these emails. So that's pretty much, the first step. You, let's say CEO real estate and then gmail.com or Yahoo or whatever, you get all of these emails and then you send them, saying, do you want to see it, or it's gonna cause this and that, or do you want to be early, user
beta
or whatever,
tester,
I can give you a discount.
Something.
Yeah, beta tester or whatever. So with this first email, I can just write it right now after this call, in 30 minutes, and I can send it to hundreds of people and then just see what they say. They're gonna see yeah, I want access, and I can just say like, okay, it's still in development. Thank you so much for your interest. I'm putting you on my email list, and once the demo is out, you're going to be the first one to hear about it. So this is very, very early because this is very rough, dirty, and quick. 30 minutes, you can build, like 100 emails who are highly interested people in your service. And then once you have that kind of like primary signal or confirmation or proof validation saying there are people interested in this, and these people are CEOs or I don't know, like your real estate investors or something. So these people are like in my like buyer persona target audience. So you go from there and you build a very, very simple first kind of version just to show to them, because they're already interested. They see, oh, this is interesting. Like I want to see how this develops, but they actually need to deliver something. So once you deliver something, and it can be just a mock-up, you can just make it in Photoshop or Figma or whatever, just use some template and send it to them so they can see like the tangible, visual, real result. Even though it's not working, not clickable, it can be just, like a JPEG. They're gonna see like, this is something, like tangible, like this could really help my business. This is really interesting. And then once they have, like this kind of preview, you say like, do you want to be the first, customer? This is going to cost like $500, but as a early user, because I want your feedback, I'm going to give it to you for $100 or whatever. You collect, like 5-10 people. This is your validation. This is your initial seed capital to spend, like the next couple of days or weeks developing that MVP and send it to your very early users. That's how I would go with stuff.
Wow. So that was an unexpectedly detailed and extremely helpful crash course in how to go about doing this. I mean, you've been throughout this whole conversation just an idea machine, giving us super valuable advice that we're going to have to go back through this ourselves just to catch it all. Because I mean, just that alone, the idea of that using Google as a list building tool is not something I've ever thought of before. But I think we'll end with one fun, fast question about travel, just to kind of leave on a nice note. But again, we really do appreciate your time and advice, because there's a lot for Kana to unpack behind the scenes after that to go over those ideas between yourselves. But what's the most incredible landscape and or destination you've seen from your years of travel, and or favorite coffee shop you went to?
Wow, this is a hard one. I think like emotionally it was, because here in Europe, if you spend some time traveling around Europe, it becomes pretty boring because everything just seems the same, like, oh, another church, another city hall, another plaza, whatever. And there's not a lot of diversity here regarding like architecture or culture. Obviously, like every country has their own history, their own language here in Europe. But I felt like the mentality is pretty similar to what I've seen here in Lithuania. And I think for me, it was emotionally uncomfortable to go outside of Europe. And I flew to Dubai, and I felt like, wow, this culture is like completely different. Like the language, their values, their beliefs is completely different from what I'm used to seeing in Europe. We have pretty much, like the same religion and same kind of like traditions, festivals, and time zone better. Like Europe is super small. So I think like for me, flying to Dubai and seeing the huge gap between, like all of these Syrians, Pakistanis just sleeping outside in the desert and building all of these skyscrapers, and then seeing all of that artificial culture of shopping malls, of living, like high spender life, and not really having that much to offer other than desert and super tall buildings. I got to interact with one Syrian guy living in Dubai. So for me, it was just, everything was just so new. And, like, I don't know if you understand Celsius, it was probably 40 degrees. So I don't know how much that is in Fahrenheit, but that's like super hot for me. And at night it would be like 38. So like it would drop like 2 degrees. So for me, the food, the culture, the whole like vibe of being there was emotionally very, very different. And I felt like, wow, I'm stepping outside of my comfort zone, and this is scary, but this is interesting, and I want to learn more about like how people live here, what they're interested in, and so on. And regarding coffee shop, I think Chiang Mai is probably the best place in the world for coffee shops. You know, like this is fucking insane. Like, man, like you can go to, I think they have more coffee shops than actual people there. So I hope these people are going to be able to recover after this pandemic, but just their love for the craft and also the ratio of the cost to value is incredible. Like I probably had the best, you know, like $1 or even like 90-cent coffee in Chiang Mai that could easily beat, you know, like Australian or New York flat white or whatever. So for me, it was just mind blowing. It's probably not one coffee shop. I probably couldn't just, you know, like get one coffee shop that was my favorite, but just like the whole coffee scene and consistent quality across, you know, like the city was just insane. Like, how is this even possible? So yeah, that would be.
I went to Chiang Mai twice about 6 months ago because I lived in Thailand for a few months, and that's funny. We actually had a guest on here who's a rapper in Thailand, and his parents owned a coffee shop in Chiang Mai, so it's pretty funny. And we had asked him about, because he's from Chiang Mai, and we asked him about growing up there and what the coffee culture was like, kind of. If like that's kind of funny that that's the city you went to, because Con, I made a prediction about where in the world you'd pick, and I was like, "There's a place in Chiang Mai that I know is pretty good." So it's pretty funny that's actually what you came up with. But we have one last question that we like to ask all of our guests. So if people, you know, like what you've been talking about, want to support your different projects, read your writing, where should we point them? Your website, Twitter, LinkedIn. Where do you send people if they like this conversation, want to learn more about you and what you've done?
Yeah. So generally, like, if you're busy enough, just get whatever you got in this conversation, think about it and apply it. Like, I'm fine being where I'm right now because I know that many people are already overwhelmed, including myself, with newsletters and, you know, like Twitter feeds and Facebook feeds and new influencers, new people to follow. But if anything resonated and you want to hear more from me, like my newsletter, I think is the main kind of like place where I share stuff, what I'm working on. And I try to be as consistent as possible on that. I quit most of social media 2 years ago. You can still like find me on LinkedIn, but I'm not really like sharing much there. So my newsletter is probably the best place if you're interested in lifestyle design stuff, you know, like entrepreneurship, freelancing, and just whatever I find interesting. And if you're a content writer or want to become one, probably you can check out also my new project, contentwritingjobs.com, where we're trying to build a frictionless platform to connect writers with companies and organizations seeking for content producers. So we're still like in very, very early stage, but we're sending weekly, and we plan to do daily newsletter with new jobs and new opportunities for writers. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can subscribe.
I love that answer. You're not aggressive about pushing it. I like that a lot. This is really fun for Kyle and I, and we honestly learned a ton, which is our goal for doing this. So thank you so much for coming on with us, and best of luck with your projects. And, you know, I might be applying for some content writing jobs myself as one of the different things I explore per your recommendation of writing and marketing and all the things there.
Thank you so much.
Sure. My pleasure. I think learning and getting paid to learn is the best way, because like most of my career, I was promising things to people that I didn't even do. And then, you know, I would land clients and they would pay me to do it. So like I would need to figure out on the job. So like writing, and if you have already a background in real estate programming, computer science, whatever it is, you can just say like, look, I'm gonna do this for you know, like X amount of money, and I'm gonna produce, you know, like X amount of articles for you on this topic and that, and they're gonna pay you. You're gonna be kind of like pressured to actually perform, and you're gonna learn a lot from that. So there's just really win-win for everyone. But yeah, thank you guys for having me. And if you want to chat more, yeah, you can always find me on my newsletter. And yeah, like when you subscribe, my email is there. So just respond.
Cool. Thank you.
And And that wraps up our interview with Tomas Laurinavicius. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you all did too. Lewis, how can people help support our show?
Hey, Kyle, I thought that conversation was awesome. It was a dream of mine when we started this podcast to get him on the show, and I'm so pleased we were able to so early in the scheme of things. If you enjoyed the conversation and want to encourage us to keep producing content, the best way for you to do that is to engage with the show, whether that's sending us a message on social media with feedback or a cool story about something that happened to you when you listened or something you learned, sharing a post on Instagram, retweeting it on Twitter, or leaving a rating or review on iTunes. Any of those really help us out know that what we're doing is pleasing people and providing value. So please do any of those things if you can. Otherwise, we will see you in a couple of days with the next episode sometime next week. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.